"This is the man I want as my husband, Mom," the alien princess said, pointing to the human man. The imperial capital floated in silence around a blue star, a city made of rings and towers that had stood for thousands of years. Alien ships moved in careful lines, following rules older than many civilizations. Everything in the empire had order, tradition, and hierarchy. Nothing was accidental, nothing was rushed. Humans did not belong here. Ethan Hale knew that the moment his small transport docked at Ring 7, every being he passed stared at him. Some had scaled skin, some glowed faintly, some had eyes that never blinked. He was the only human in sight, wearing a simple work uniform, carrying a small tool case. No guards followed him. No honors were announced. He was not important, at least not by imperial standards. Ethan was an engineer from Earth, hired because the Empire had a problem it could not solve. Their ancient Stargate network, the backbone of interstellar travel, was failing. The designs were old, layered with forgotten systems. Alien scientists understood the theory, but not the practical fixes. Humans, on the other hand, were known for repairing things that should not work anymore. Ethan did not think about politics or reputation. He only cared about the job. Inside the Stargate control complex, alarms pulsed softly. Technicians argued in sharp, clipped tones. Data streamed across floating displays, changing colors as systems drifted closer to failure. Ethan stood quietly at the edge, watching. He noticed something quickly. Everyone was trying to preserve perfection. No one wanted to risk temporary damage. No one wanted to touch the core manually. Ethan stepped forward. "If the stabilizer ring keeps drifting, the gate will collapse," he said calmly. "You need to shut down auxiliary flow and reset the rotation by hand." The aliens turned toward him, surprised. One senior technician hissed in disbelief. "That area is unsafe. No one enters the core chamber." Ethan nodded. "I know, that's why it's still broken." Before anyone could stop him, he took a breathing mask and walked toward the sealed corridor. The door closed behind him with a heavy sound. High above, in a private observation chamber, Princess Sailari watched. She had come only out of duty, expecting another report filled with excuses. She was tall, with silver-blue skin and calm golden eyes. As future ruler, she had been trained to see patterns, power, and weakness. Humans, according to her education, were weak in all three. Then she saw the human enter the core. The chamber shook as Ethan reached the heart of the system. Heat pressed against his suit. Lights flickered. He ignored the fear tightening in his chest and focused on the machine. The design was elegant but overcomplicated. Layers added on top of layers. He disconnected 3 redundant loops, rerouted power through a manual bypass, and physically locked the stabilizer into place. The alarm stopped. Across the capital, ships steadied. Trade lanes reopened. Millions of lives continued as if nothing had happened. Ethan exited the chamber, exhausted and slightly burned, and handed his tools to the nearest technician. "That should hold for a few years," he said. "You'll need a redesign after that." He did not look up at the observation window. He did not ask for thanks. Princess Sailari did not look away. In the days that followed, Ethan worked quietly. He repaired secondary gates, trained alien crews in human-style problem-solving, and slept very little. He treated workers and nobles the same, speaking with simple honesty. When praised, he shrugged. When questioned, he explained patiently. This confused the court. Power in the empire was loud. It was displayed. It was enforced. Ethan had none of that. Yet systems worked better when he was present. Sailari began visiting the control centers often. At first, she stayed hidden, listening. She watched how Ethan never raised his voice, even when insulted. She saw how he accepted blame for failures that were not his and gave credit away freely. One day, she spoke to him directly. "You do not fear this place," she said. Ethan wiped grease from his hands. "I respect it," he replied. Fear doesn't help fix things. She tilted her head. You know you are surrounded by beings who believe you are inferior. He met her gaze without hesitation. That's fine. I don't need them to believe in me. I just need the work to hold. Something shifted inside her then, not romance, recognition. The Empire soon faced another crisis. A primary gate near the outer colonies destabilized suddenly, worse than predicted. Evacuation would take weeks. Collapse would take hours. The Council panicked. Protocol demanded isolation of the system, sacrificing the colonies to save the core worlds. Ethan studied the data and shook his head. You can save them, he said, but someone has to stay inside the gate during the reset. Silence followed. No alien volunteered. Ethan began preparing his suit. Selari stepped forward. If you do this, you may not survive. He gave a small smile. Then make sure the records show the right fix. The operation was brutal. Radiation flooded the chamber. Ethan's hands shook as he held the alignment steady long enough for the system to reconfigure. He felt pain, fear, and doubt, but he did not let go. When it was over, the colonies were safe. Ethan collapsed. He woke in a medical chamber, weak but alive. Alien healers moved around him in silence. At the far end of the room, Princess Selari stood with the Empress herself. The Empress was ancient, her presence heavy with authority. She studied the human with unreadable eyes. He risked himself without hesitation, Selari said quietly. Not for reward, not for status, for responsibility. The Empress said nothing. Days later, the imperial court gathered in full assembly. Nobles filled the hall, ambassadors whispered. Ethan stood near the back, uncomfortable in borrowed formal clothing. He had been told only that his presence was required. Princess Selari stepped forward, her voice clear. She spoke of the failing gates, of the lives saved, of the way humans face problems directly without pride. Then she turned, extended her arm, and pointed. This is the man I want as my husband, Mom. Shock froze the hall. Ethan's heart dropped. The Empress stared at her daughter, at the human, at the court that suddenly realized the future had shifted. And for the first time in centuries, imperial tradition began to crack. The hall did not explode into noise at first. It went completely silent. Hundreds of nobles, commanders, and ambassadors stood frozen, staring at the human and the princess. Some blinked in disbelief. Some felt anger rise in their chests. Others felt fear, because change had just entered a place that hated change. Ethan felt every eye on him. His mind raced. He had not asked for this. He had not even imagined it. He took a slow step forward and bowed slightly, more out of instinct than knowledge of protocol. Princess Selari lowered her arm and stood straight. Her expression was calm, but inside her heart beat fast. She knew what she had done. She knew there would be no turning back. The Empress rose slowly from her throne. Her long robes flowed like liquid light. When she spoke, her voice carried easily through the hall. You speak boldly, daughter, she said. You name a human. Explain. Selari did not hesitate. He has shown the qualities required to rule beside me: responsibility, courage, clear thinking under pressure. He acts for the good of others, not himself. A noble from the high blood houses stepped forward, his voice sharp. This is madness. A human is short-lived, fragile, and politically useless. This violates every imperial law. Murmurs spread. Agreement followed. Some laughed openly. Ethan raised his hand slightly. Your Majesty, he said, voice steady, I never asked for this. I respect your empire, but I do not seek marriage, power, or titles. If my presence causes harm, I will leave. The words surprised the court. Humans were expected to beg or boast. He did neither. Selari turned toward him, eyes firm. You are not causing harm. You are revealing it. The Empress watched both of them carefully. She saw her daughter's resolve. She saw the human's honesty. Finally, she spoke. The law stands, she said, but law can be tested. If this human wishes to refuse, he may. If he accepts consideration, he must face trial. Ethan frowned. Trial? Not punishment, the Empress replied. Proof. The Empire will not change for feelings, it will change for evidence. Ethan looked at Salari. She gave a small nod. Trust, not command. I will face your trials, Ethan said. Not to marry, but to prove humans are not what you think. The council chamber erupted into noise this time. The trials began the next cycle. The first was endurance. Ethan was placed in a simulated environment designed for alien physiology. Gravity was heavier, the air thinner. The temperature shifted without warning. Noble observers expected him to collapse quickly. Ethan moved slowly, conserving energy. He adjusted his breathing, tore strips from his uniform to protect exposed skin, and used the environment instead of fighting it. He did not rush. He did not quit. He lasted longer than many trained alien candidates before finally dropping to one knee. When medics rushed forward, he waved them off and stood again. I'm done, he said. I know my limits. That answer unsettled the observers more than failure would have. The second trial tested judgment. Ethan was presented with a scenario where resources were limited. Saving one group meant sacrificing another. The aliens expected strict calculation. Ethan studied the data, then changed the setup. This assumes resources are fixed, he said. They are. He rerouted supply lines, reduced waste, and reorganized labor. In the simulation, no one died. Some council members accused him of cheating. Others were silent, realizing the system itself had been flawed. The third trial was loyalty. Ethan was offered a deal by a simulated rival empire. Power, wealth, safety, and return to Earth if he betrayed imperial defenses. He refused without drama. If I accept safety at the cost of others, I don't deserve it. Princess Salari watched every trial closely. So did many who had once mocked him. Something uncomfortable was happening. Their image of humanity was cracking. Still, opposition grew stronger. A faction within the court began spreading fear. They claimed the human was manipulating the princess. That humanity sought control through marriage. That allowing one human would open the door to invasion. Ethan heard the rumors. He did not confront them. He continued working. Then disaster struck. A training fleet near the border went silent. Signals vanished. Evidence suggested an ambush by a hostile coalition that had long watched the Empire for weakness. The council argued. Protocol demanded retreat and fortification. Waiting was safe. Ethan reviewed the data quietly. They are testing you, he said. They think you are divided. A commander snapped at him. This is not your place. Salari stepped forward. It is if he is right. Ethan proposed a risky rescue using damaged stargates and decoy signals. It was not elegant, it was human. The council refused. The Empress listened. Finally, she turned to Ethan. If this fails, millions may die, Ethan nodded. If we do nothing, they already will. Silence followed. Proceed, the Empress said. The rescue was chaotic. Human unpredictability met alien firepower. Ships moved in ways no enemy expected. Signals lied. Paths shifted. The trapped fleet escaped with heavy damage but alive. For the first time, the Empire had survived because it broke its own rules. When the fleet returned, cheers echoed across the docks. Ethan stood alone, exhausted, watching repair crews rush forward. Salari joined him. You didn't have to do this, she said softly. Yes, he replied. I did. The court reconvened days later. Opposition still existed, but it was weaker now. Evidence stood where prejudice once ruled. The Empress rose again. The trials are not complete, she declared. But the question has changed. We no longer ask if a human is worthy. She looked directly at Ethan. We ask if we are willing to grow. The hall remained silent, not in shock this time, but in thought. And far beyond the capital, unseen forces began to move, watching humanity step closer to the center of the galaxy. News of the rescue spread faster than the Empire could control. Merchants talked. Soldiers talked. Even distant worlds began to whisper the same idea. The empire had been saved by a human plan. Some praised it. Others felt fear. Change always frightened those who lived comfortably inside old rules. Ethan did not celebrate. He returned to work the next morning, helping repair damaged ships and recalibrate unstable gates. He slept little and spoke even less. His body still ached from stress and radiation, but he ignored it. Work was easier than thinking. Princess Celari noticed the signs of exhaustion. She visited him in the repair bay, watching quietly as he adjusted a damaged power conduit. "You push yourself too hard," she said. Ethan tightened the final seal and stepped back. "People are still in danger. I can rest later." She studied him for a long moment. "Humans are strange," she said. "You act as if survival is a shared duty." "It is," he replied simply. She smiled faintly, then grew serious. "There are those in the court who still want you removed." "I know," Ethan said. "They don't scare me." "They should," she replied. "They are not clumsy." The warning came just in time. 3 cycles later, the Empire's early warning network detected a massive fleet moving through deep space. Not the hostile coalition from before, but something larger, older, stronger. A power that had waited centuries for weakness. The council chamber filled with tension. Holographic maps showed the enemy's slow, unstoppable advance. Their technology was advanced, their numbers overwhelming. This was not a raid. It was an invasion. Panic rose again. Commanders argued for retreat. Politicians argued for surrender. Some suggested sacrificing outer systems to protect the core worlds. Ethan stood near the edge of the room, listening. He recognized the pattern. Fear narrowing options. Tradition freezing movement. "This enemy does not think like you," Ethan said suddenly. Several heads turned sharply. A general snapped. "And you do," Ethan stepped forward, pointing at the map. "They expect you to react predictably. They think your size makes you slow. They believe fear will split you." "That is true," a noble muttered. "It doesn't have to be," Ethan replied. Princess Celari moved beside him. "Speak." Ethan took a breath. "You cannot beat them in direct battle, but you don't need to. You need to survive the first strike and break their confidence." The Empress watched him carefully. "Explain." Ethan outlined a plan no alien doctrine supported. Use civilian evacuation fleets as sensor webs. Convert damaged stargates into traps instead of repairing them. Spread command authority instead of centralizing it. Let local leaders act independently. "Chaos," one commander said with disgust. "Adaptation," Ethan corrected. The council was divided. Old power resisted. Fear argued louder than logic. Then an unexpected voice spoke. A senior admiral, ancient and respected, stood slowly. "I have fought for 5 centuries," he said. "Every enemy we face studied our rules. This human fights without rules. I support his plan." That broke the deadlock. The Empress made her decision. Ethan Hale will coordinate defensive strategy under Princess Celari's authority. Gasps echoed through the chamber. Ethan froze. "Your Majesty, I am not." "You are what we need," the Empress said firmly. "Do not refuse now." The invasion began 2 days later. Enemy fleets emerged from hyperspace like a dark tide. Entire systems went silent. The Empire's sensors screamed warnings. Then confusion spread through the enemy ranks. Civilian fleets moved in unexpected patterns, transmitting false data. Stargates collapsed exactly when enemy ships passed through, scattering them across space. Local commanders acted without waiting for approval, striking quickly and retreating faster. The enemy advanced, but not cleanly, not confidently. Ethan worked non-stop in the command center, coordinating through simple, direct orders. He trusted others to think, not just obey. Princess Celari stayed by his side. She saw how humans handled pressure, not by pretending control, but by accepting uncertainty. A critical moment came when the enemy breached the outer defense ring. A massive fleet headed straight for the capital. Alien commanders demanded a full retreat to protect the throne world. Ethan shook his head. If we run now, they will never stop. What do you suggest? Selari asked. Ethan pointed at a cluster of unstable gates near the capital. We stand here, and we make them pay for every meter. The defense was brutal but precise. Empire fleets fought not to destroy but to delay. Enemy ships were pulled into unstable space, cut off, isolated. For the first time, the invading force hesitated. That hesitation changed everything. Allied powers, long fearful of the enemy, saw the Empire standing firm. They joined the fight. Pressure mounted. Supply lines broke. After weeks of constant strain, the enemy fleet withdrew, not defeated, but no longer confident. The galaxy watched in stunned silence. In the aftermath, the Empire reeled. Losses were heavy, systems damaged, lives changed forever, but the core world stood. The council gathered again, quieter now, humble. The Empress addressed them. We survived because we listened to a voice we once ignored. She turned to Ethan. You have changed this empire. Ethan shook his head. No, you chose to change. The Empress studied him for a long time. Then she bowed her head slightly. The room froze, an Empress bowing to a human. Princess Selari felt her breath catch. This was more than victory. This was history breaking, but not everyone was satisfied. That night, as Ethan walked alone through a quiet corridor, alarms suddenly screamed. Lights failed. A hidden door opened behind him. He turned just in time to see armed figures moving fast. A voice hissed, "The human dies tonight." Ethan ran. He did not know the palace well. He followed instinct, memory, and luck. Blasts scorched walls behind him. He ducked into a service tunnel, heart pounding. A familiar figure appeared ahead. Princess Selari stood in the corridor, weapon raised. She fired once. Silence followed. Security forces flooded the area moments later, arresting the attackers. A radical faction, desperate to stop change, exposed themselves. Ethan leaned against the wall, shaking. Selari approached him slowly. You should not have to face this alone, she said. He met her gaze. Neither should you. They stood there not as princess and human, but as two beings who had carried the same weight. The Empire had survived invasion. But now it faced a deeper challenge, accepting that the future would never look like the past, and that humanity was no longer at the edge of the galaxy, but standing firmly at its heart. The aftermath of the invasion left the Empire exhausted but alive. Systems needed repair, fleets were damaged, and lives had been lost. Yet the lessons of the human engineer, Ethan Hale, and the bravery of Princess Selari could not be ignored. For the first time in centuries, the Empire's leaders faced the truth. Survival required more than tradition. It required understanding, adaptability, and courage, qualities humanity had shown. Ethan returned to his work, helping stabilize stargates, train crews, and coordinate repairs across multiple worlds. He never asked for titles or honors. He only moved methodically, solving one problem at a time. People began to notice. Even the most stubborn nobles could not deny his effectiveness. Slowly, fear and prejudice began to fade. Princess Selari often joined him, observing quietly or offering suggestions. She learned from him as much as he taught. They developed a mutual respect, a partnership born not from obligation, but from shared responsibility. Selari saw in Ethan a new way of leading, one that valued intelligence over rank, creativity over force, and courage over protocol. The Empress summoned her council for a historic meeting. The room was tense, as every noble waited to see how the Empire would respond to this unprecedented situation. Ethan and Selari entered together, their presence commanding attention without demanding it. The Empress spoke first. Our empire has survived because we faced change rather than ignored it, because we trusted an outsider, a human, with what we once believed only we could manage. That choice has saved lives, fleets, and worlds. She paused, letting her words sink in. Many nobles shifted uncomfortably, but some nodded slowly. Evidence of survival and success was undeniable. Tradition alone could not deny results. The Empress continued, her voice firm. The law forbidding interspecies marriage in the royal line will be repealed. Not as a favor, but because it is necessary. Our future depends on openness, cooperation, and the willingness to accept what is right, not just what is expected. Whispers ran through the council chamber. Some cheered silently, others were still too shocked to speak. Ethan felt all eyes on him, but he remained calm. He had not sought this, yet the weight of possibility rested on his shoulders. Selari gave him a small nod, a silent promise that she would stand by him. The formal ceremony that followed was unlike any the Empire had seen. Aliens of all kinds watched as Selari and Ethan stood side by side. There were no grand displays of magic or force, no exaggerated rituals to display wealth or power. Instead, the ceremony emphasized partnership, unity, and responsibility. Each took an oath not to rule over the other, but to rule with the other, for the good of all citizens, human and alien alike. The day passed, and word spread across the galaxy. Many doubted, many mocked at first, but the story could not be denied. A human now stood beside the future ruler of the Empire. Humanity had moved from the edge to the heart of interstellar politics. The galaxy began to whisper not about weakness, but about potential. Life in the imperial capital slowly returned to a new normal. Ethan continued his work with stargates and infrastructure, but now with the authority and respect his position required. He advised not as a guest, but as a recognized voice in the Empire's council. Selari ruled with vision, balancing tradition with innovation, and she often sought his counsel, not because she needed validation, but because she valued insight and clarity over ceremony. Together, they oversaw reforms that strengthened the empire. Local leaders were given more autonomy, emergency response systems were updated, and diplomatic ties with distant worlds were strengthened. Alien scientists and engineers began to study human problem-solving methods, acknowledging that different approaches could complement their advanced technology. Despite their growing influence, both Ethan and Selari remained humble. They recognized that leadership was not about ego, but about responsibility. They moved through the capital streets often, unnoticed at first, quietly observing the lives of citizens, understanding the needs of the people. Their actions inspired many, from young nobles to common workers, to act bravely, wisely, and with compassion. Ethan's presence also changed how humans were seen throughout the galaxy. Before, humans were underestimated, short-lived, fragile, irrelevant. Now their adaptability, intelligence, and moral courage were widely recognized. Other species began to seek alliances with humanity, eager to learn and cooperate. Humans were no longer outsiders, they were partners in shaping the future. Even the hostile coalition that had attacked the Empire months earlier had taken notice. Reports described a human whose thinking had confounded fleets and saved entire systems. The coalition did not underestimate the Empire again. For the first time, the galaxy saw humans as a force that could influence history, not with brute power, but with creativity, courage, and perseverance. As the months passed, small challenges continued to arise: mechanical failures, political disputes, and the occasional natural disaster. But Ethan and Selari faced each together, always with calm reasoning and mutual respect. Their partnership became a model for leadership, demonstrating that strength was not measured by domination or fear, but by responsibility, intelligence, and care for others. At night, when the capital was quiet, Ethan and Selari would sometimes walk through the upper gardens of the royal palace. Towers of crystal and steel glowed softly in the moonlight. The air was still, carrying scents from distant planets brought by controlled winds. They spoke not of politics, but of ideas, dreams, and the people who relied on them. "You've changed the empire," Selari said quietly one evening, "not just by saving lives, but by showing them what matters: Ethan smiled faintly. They already had it inside them. They just needed someone willing to remind them. She looked at him, her eyes thoughtful. And you reminded them without wanting glory. Glory is useless if it doesn't help anyone, he replied. Scifi nodded. Then let us keep helping. In time, the story of the human and the princess became legend. Not a tale of magic or brute force, but of courage, ingenuity, and partnership. Children across the empire learned that bravery was not about physical strength alone. Leaders studied how humans approached problems, learning that success often came from clarity, patience, and moral responsibility. Even the most skeptical citizens slowly recognized that the empire's greatest strength was now unity across differences, human and alien together. Years later, when historians wrote about the era, they did not speak only of battles or politics. They wrote of a human who stepped into a world that was not his, of a princess who refused to accept prejudice, and of an empire that learned to value action over tradition. Their story became a reminder that change, when embraced with wisdom and courage, could shape the future for the better. Ethan and Scifi continued their work, quietly guiding the empire to stability and prosperity. They faced challenges, of course, unexpected threats, natural disasters, and the complexities of governing millions across countless worlds. But they faced them as partners, relying on reason, humanity, and trust. The galaxy, once indifferent to humanity, now watched with respect. Other species began to reconsider old prejudices. Diplomats from distant systems approached humans not as weak outsiders, but as equals and valuable allies. And humans themselves, inspired by one man's courage, began to see their potential on a cosmic scale. In the end, the empire was stronger than it had ever been. Not because of power alone, not because of fear or tradition, but because a human had reminded everyone, alien and human alike, that bravery, intelligence, and responsibility could change the course of history. And standing beside the princess, Ethan became more than an engineer or advisor. He became a symbol of what humanity could achieve when it dared to step forward, not with arrogance, but with heart, mind, and unwavering courage. Together, they looked toward the stars, not as rulers or subjects, but as partners shaping the destiny of a galaxy that had once thought humans were too small to matter. And for the first time in centuries, the Empire and the galaxy understood the true value of humanity.